With a committed director, a lightened draft of the script, and eye-popping conceptual art by Giger, The Tourist was ready for production, and yet it never came. Where did it all fall apart? Well, there are several versions. First, according to Patricia Knopp, Gibson one day found himself sitting on a plane next to Frank Rodham. Rodham apparently went on and on about how the script was so special because it was so dark, which caused Gibson to completely lose confidence in the lighter toned script they were prepared to deliver, allegedly leading to the project's collapse. This story may have later developed into a rumor that Gibson and Rodham engaged in a full-on fistfight aboard a plane over the rights to the script. Rodham denies this fight ever took place, claiming instead that it was between Gibson and Adrian Lyne over who would pick up the check at a restaurant. Gibson denies the original story as well. His memory of the project's cancellation went like this. After 6 months of work on the new script with Patricia Knopp, the project was presented to Universal's then film division president, Ned Tannen, and despite the considerable amount of money that had already been spent on development, he, without any prior warning, simply said no. Still another version is presented by Renee Missel, who remembers that the project was moving forward steadily until Tannen stepped down as film division president in December 1982. His replacement, Bob Ramey, was none too enthused by the idea when it was presented to him, and he sent the film for at least the second time into turnaround. Many agree that this period was the closest The Tourist ever came to reaching theater screens, but the story isn't over yet. Gibson had finally given up on the film, and went on to direct Poltergeist 2: The Other Side, which also featured conceptual art by Giger, but Missel refused to relent, deciding instead to redevelop the script and start all over. It was probably around this time that The Tourist began developing a reputation as a screenplay so thoroughly unconventional that no writer would be able to tame it. Missel is said to have hired every writer she knew at one point or another to take a crack at it, to no avail. Most everyone involved says that only one person could have ever made the script truly work, and that was Clair Noto. Even Missel, looking back, tends to agree. Still, she never rehired Noto, possibly because of the writer's alleged uncollaborative nature, or perhaps she was still stung by what she saw as Noto's betrayal when she took the script to American Zoetrope. Noto claims that Missel was simply determined to rob her of any screen credit on the finished film. She heard rumors over the ensuing years that the setting was changed from New York to San Francisco, that characters' names were changed, the tone was made more politically correct, all of it done in an effort to ensure that she didn't have to be credited as the original writer. Whatever the motivation, Missel continued pursuing other writers. Among those confirmed to have delivered a draft are Tom Topor, whose work was considered unsatisfactory, and Missel's own husband, Roger Simon. The Simon draft did gain some traction, getting picked up at Paramount Pictures by executives Michael Eisner and Don Steele, as well as producer Joel Silver. Paramount commissioned another draft from Simon, but apparently dropped the film after Universal revealed that the studio, if they wished to produce the film, would be forced to pay all development costs, which included the money that had been spent on the many rewrites, as well as the Giger conceptual art. This was the last straw for Missel. After 6 years of struggling, she was finally forced to put The Tourist behind her. The script would continue to change hands in the ensuing years. Noto believes that Warner Brothers may have controlled it at some point, where it was optioned and re-optioned without any real commitment to actually making it. Many seem to feel that the script had no real chance of being made in the 80s. With the success or acclaim of more family-oriented films like E.T. and Starman, the tone of 80s sci-fi seemed to favor positivity over negativity. But what about the 90s? An era of dark, adult-oriented sci-fi films like Terminator 2 and 12 Monkeys. Maybe this new decade would favor a vision like that offered by Noto's almost 20-year-old script. In 1997, the impossible happened. Universal Studios put the project back into development, this time under the supervision of Lawrence Gordon and Michael Levy, and they rehired Clair Noto 17 years after writing her first draft to update the script. She accepted and delivered a new draft in July 1997, coincidentally, right when the blockbuster sci-fi action comedy Men in Black was opening in theaters. After that film's massive success and its similarity to The Tourist in terms of its concept, Universal scrapped their plans to resurrect the film. But again, this did not kill it completely. The latest draft of the script was still continuing to draw attention to the project. Universal would end up putting the film back into development yet again, and back again under its initial producer, Sean Daniel. Noto claims that her new script was enough to bring Jake Scott, Ridley's son funnily enough, on board as director, but for reasons unknown to her, he dropped out. According to rumor, the film is still in development at Universal Studios to this day. Noto, according to interviews published in the book The Greatest Sci-Fi Movies Never Made by David Hughes, still feels, or at least she felt at the time, that The Tourist still had a shot at being made. That book was published in 2001 and revised in 2008. Since then, there doesn't appear to be anything. Does that mean the film is dead? Most likely, yes. It's entirely possible it is still in development somewhere, but it doesn't sound like anyone thinks The Tourist has a shot in hell of ever reaching the screen. Too many ideas from the script have been lifted from it wholesale for other movies throughout the decades. Too many have borrowed its dark existential tone. The Tourist may be a fascinating meditation on loneliness and the need for connection, but it's not hard to see why its pessimistic vision would be considered too much of a risk for a major studio. In examining where it went wrong throughout the years, most agree that it should never have been a studio movie in the first place. Missile is confident the film would have fared much better as an indie production, or even as a European production with a director like Paul Verhoeven behind it. Personally, I'm not sure if this story would have been feasible, at least at the time, as a low-budget indie. It may be mostly character and dialogue driven, but still, the script features some ambitious and effects-heavy sequences that would have likely been impossible to achieve without studio resources. I agree with Missile when she says that the film should have been produced right away, in 1980, as a low-scale Hollywood production, with minimal studio interference, like, for instance, David Cronenberg's Videodrome, which Universal would produce in 1983, or maybe it would have fared better if it were written just a bit earlier, in the late 70s, when dark and melancholic stories were considered more palatable. Once people began to question the bizarreness of the script, it became a victim of the classic attitudes of Hollywood. It was too unusual to actually make, because it might lose money, but it was too good to let anyone else make, because they might make money. And in the efforts to make it more mainstream, it became generic, losing what made it so special in the first place, killing the enthusiasm people had for it. And I do think everyone involved did genuinely want to make this movie. Noto takes a pessimistic view of the whole experience, saying The Tourist didn't do anybody any good. It hurt me, it hurt a lot of people. And I'd say she's not entirely wrong. Missile, after spending so many years working on the film for almost no money, only produced a small handful of films in the subsequent years, and despite scoring a major hit in 1994 with Nell, she appears to have mostly retired from producing to run her own management company. Gibson appears to have struggled through the next few years. After the critically panned Poltergeist 2 and some television films, he enjoyed a career high point in 1993 with What's Love Got to Do With It, based on the life of Tina Turner. But his next film, The Juror, was a major flop, and he only managed to direct one more film before tragically succumbing to cancer in 2004. Rodham was never able to fulfill the early promise of Quadrophenia, and after directing a string of commercial failures, left feature filmmaking to return to television, where he hit pay dirt with the creation of Master Chef. H.R. Giger was perhaps the least affected. He would continue to be hired on film productions for years to come, though, as I mentioned, only a small portion would actually use his designs on screen. His reputation continued to grow as he expanded his talents into other fields, designing album covers, video games, music videos, even microphone stands. By the time he passed away in 2014, he could be confident that his legacy was secure, and with the perennial popularity of the Alien films, it's likely his work will always continue to attract new followers. Certainly, the one who was hit hardest by the entire experience was Clair Noto. To date, other than a couple of scripts written for television, she does not appear to have been involved in any other film productions. At least, any productions that ever saw the light of day. She was reported to have been involved in several projects, like a mysterious script called Blondes from the early 80s, or a controversial failed production called Slave, a True Story, based on the true story of a woman who was kidnapped and held prisoner for 7 years by a couple in Northern California, which tried to start up in the late 80s. There was an apparently abandoned adaptation of the comic book Evangeline in the late 90s, and finally, a biopic based on the tragic real-life story of Julia Pastrana, a Mexican woman born with several genetic conditions who spent much of her life as a carnival sideshow attraction. The film was in development from the early 90s to the early 2000s, at one point attracting the attention of Richard Gere, but was never made. I've also discovered some suggestions that she was involved in the writing of Clan of the Cave Bear, a 1986 prehistoric epic starring Daryl Hannah that actually was made, but she doesn't appear to have received final screen credit. It's sad not only that Noto wasn't able to produce The Tourist, but also that she was unable to create anything else, despite her best efforts. Frank Rodham has said that he considers her one of the greatest, unrecognized cinematic talents of all time. Admittedly, The Tourist is not a perfect script. It suffers from some structural flaws, the story does seem to meander in places, and it can feel very much like a product of its time. Certain descriptions of hairstyles and costumes bring to mind the aesthetic design of Working Girl. This was 1980 after all. The Tourist was undoubtedly ahead of its time when it was written. For obvious reasons, I feel it no longer is. I would say the story is in need of updating, but then I remember that Noto already has updated it. I'm certainly curious to see what changes she made in the 97 draft. Even with so many of her ideas being stolen, she's hinted at yet another innovation in the new script that we have yet to see on screen. Personally, I don't know if The Tourist, no matter how many times it's updated, will ever escape the confines of development hell. All I do know is Noto managed to write a tremendously fascinating script that continues to capture people's imaginations, and we can only wonder what other stories she might have been able to create if she'd had the opportunity. I suppose we can take solace in the fact that her ideas have still managed to permeate into popular culture, but I still feel bad for Noto, who has basically received nothing for her creation of this remarkably influential script. I sincerely hope that someday, if Noto decides that the film has completely lost its chances of ever being made, she gets the opportunity to publish her work, or perhaps adapt it into a graphic novel, or whatever she may feel like doing with it, so that we may gain the opportunity to recognize her talents. Until then, I guess we can only imagine what a mind-blowing movie The Tourist might have been if it had only gotten its chance. If you want to read this script for yourself, you can probably find the 1981 draft online with a quick Google search. And as an interesting side note, The Tourist was also subject to an unofficial novelization in 2014 by writer Lee McGeorge. The book was briefly available to download for free, but has since been the subject of a cease and desist order and taken down. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about this project, check out the book that provided most of the information presented here, The Greatest Sci-Fi Movies Never Made by David Hughes. This is a great book, fantastically well researched and bursting with incredible stories not just on this film, but a whole galaxy of additional unmade masterpieces. I'm sure I'll be consulting this one for future episodes. Some supplemental material also came from the online articles The Tourist, the Hollywood horror story of writer Clair Noto's unfilmed masterpiece by Fred Zeben on hrgiger.com, The Greatest Sci-Fi Screenplay Never Produced by Bryn Tilley on thestorydepartment.com, and Frank Rodham from spark us to the perfect souffle by Henry Barnes on theguardian.com. Links to other articles sourced in these videos can also be found at this page on IMDb. This has been Disregarding Henry with another episode of Unmade Masterpieces. Please subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, leave a comment, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Tumblr, and if you want, you can support me on Patreon. You can also check out plenty of other videos on my channel, like the previous episode of Unmade Masterpieces exploring the production history of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which was nearly helmed by Repo Man director Alex Cox, or how about a quickie examining a bizarre and mysterious Harmony Korine project about a giant pig, called What Makes Pistachio Nuts. Be sure to check out my brother's channel too, and his show Rough Cuts, where he examines different versions of movies and compares and contrasts them. Episode 1 is on a fan re-edit of Brian De Palma's horror comedy Raising Cain, and episode 2 covers the 4-hour work print version of pioneering mockumentary classic This Is Spinal Tap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!